Hello, everyone. Hello. Welcome. Welcome to let me make sure I get this number correct. Oh, wow, magic number. Welcome to the 432nd meeting. That's 432. The 432nd meeting of the New York Comics and Picture Story Symposium. My name is Bill Cardelopoulos. The symposium, for those of you who don't know, is a weekly speaker series. It was founded over 10 years ago by Ben Catchor as an outgrowth of the Occupy movement. It was part of a kind of constellation of activities that were sort of exploring the idea of bringing education outside of the structures of the educational institutions and making it more freely available. So Ben started this weekly comics and picture story symposium dedicated to comics, visual narrative, and text image issues. And, as I said, what it's kind of become over the years is a free weekly speaker series. And since COVID, it's been a mostly online free weekly speaker series, which has been great because when we started out, it was all people who were in or were passing through New York. And now we can talk to people wherever they are, including people like Ellen who are in North Carolina. And anyway, as I said, the symposium was founded by Ben Ketchor. More recently, others have been involved. So this season, it's been my privilege, along with Austin English, Ben, and Lily Correa, to co-curate this program. And as well, we've had contributions from Danny Fingeroth too. Okay, so this is, as I said, the 432nd meeting of the New York Comics and Picture Story Symposium. It's the first one this season that I'm hosting myself. Um, and I don't want to say too much, but I just want to say it's my great privilege to be hosting Ellen O'Grady tonight, who's going to be talking about her work. And I have to say, I think probably a lot of people over the last couple of years, I've been very grateful for Ellen's comics. Um, I mean, the subject is so big and deep, and it's like I feel like if I start talking about it, I won't stop. But it's just certainly one of the unusual things of I think the current situation is that we're accessing it so much through social media platforms, and in many ways that's great because there's a lot of things that I think we just wouldn't see at all if people, particularly the people in Gaza, didn't have access to social media. I mean, we've seen how international press hasn't been allowed in, and the press that is there has been targeted. So that's good. On the other hand, these are horrible platforms and it's like the worst possible way to like access and process information. You've got this kind of bombardment of random images and videos that are also kind of insanely interspersed with like clips of like Susie and the Banshees and like or whatever, whatever else your feed kind of pop puts in front of your face. Um, but I've found certainly Ellen's comics to be very helpful over the years, and one of the things over the last couple of years, and certainly one of the things I've been happy to find. I think in general, too, for those of us who haven't been very actively engaged for a long period of time with the struggle in Palestine, it's been certainly very helpful to hear the voices of people like Ellen who have been involved with these things for a long time. I mean, Ellen has, she'll talk about, her background and her work, but, as you'll see, she has, very authentic connections to that part of the world. But I think it's not just about knowing more. That's definitely part of it, and having more experience. But I think also not just experience with Palestine, but I think experience with witnessing, and I think that's really the thing that, I mean, in some ways many people are struggling with. On the one hand, wanting to be, sometimes all you can do is witness, and feeling limited by that and struggling with it, but at the same time feeling overwhelmed by all, the opportunity of witnessing, and not sure if the way that we can do that is helpful, and all of the kind of uh, sort of confusing and kinds of feelings that come from that, and I think in many ways, the comics that Ellen has been posting online have been very much about witnessing and modeling a kind of ethical and reflective form of witnessing that's um, empathetic to the other, but also like compassionate or self-compassionate to the witness, which is the self, often, but in a way that's still always like grounded and oriented towards, the goal of freedom, freedom, Palestinian freedom in particular, in this case, um, and uh, and I think because the work is so kind of empathetic and compassionate, but while also being informed and grounded, um, there's I feel that it kind of performs a kind of act of like connection, where even if you don't have community around us, you can connect with Ellen's comics, and I mean what I mean by that is not just that we connect with Ellen and her point of view, but I feel that Ellen's comics kind of connect us or invite us into actually a community of care, and which is, maybe just the ultimate project of just making the whole world a community of care, But anyway, like I said, if I start talking, I could talk for a long time. I'm really pleased to hear from oh, I'm just I think as pleased as everyone in the audience here tonight, to hear from Ellen, to hear her talk about her work at this tenuous moment, I remember even just a few days ago thinking like, oh, it's so nice there's a ceasefire and we're gonna go do a Gaza talk, and it's not going to be with bombs dropping, and then the bombs started dropping again. Anyway, thanks for being here, Ellen, and thanks for being here, everyone. Now I'll just read a brief bio, and then I'll turn the floor over to Ellen. Ellen O'Grady is a visual artist and the author of Outside the Ark: An Artist's Journey in Occupied Palestine, published in 2005. She spends much of her time making comics and is currently working on her second book. So with that, please join me in welcoming Ellen O'Grady. And Ellen, oh no, I've already made you a co-host, so you can go ahead and share your screen whenever you're ready. Thank you.
Before I start sharing my screen, thank you, Bill, for that beautiful introduction. Um, this feels like a really sacred space for comic artists, for people who love comics, and I'm so beyond honored to be here. And thank you all of you for being here. It's so good to see a lot of folks that I know and also folks that I don't know. Okay, here we go. Fingers crossed. And then let me just, okay, great.
Okay, take it away. Thank you.
Thanks all. Um, so this presentation will be a lot different from others that I've given. However, I often share this quote. I need to move. There we go. This is one of my favorite quotes by the 12th century mystic Hildegard of Bingen. We cannot live in a world that is not our own, in a world interpreted for us by others. An interpreted world is not home. Part of the terror is to take back our own listening, to use our own voice, to see our own light. And I think we know now, as much as any other time, the dangers of allowing us to live in an interpreted world or someone else's interpretation, and how important it is to hear with our own ears and speak with our own voice. So this morning, while making breakfast, after I had finished the presentation, I was listening to an interview, a CBS interview with Hillary Clinton and Condoleezza Rice, in which they were talking about the ceasefire plan. And Condoleezza Rice made a comment that if, and I'm paraphrasing, if Palestinians truly wanted their own state, if they wanted sovereignty, it's up to their parents to teach them better lessons. that parents need to be teaching their kids that Israel will always, well, that they need to respect that Israel will always exist. And hearing it, um, it struck me how dehumanizing that language is and how it comes from a real, from my perception, a real colonial mindset. And I wondered how many people listening would were also thinking that, and knowing that that language also comes from decades and decades and decades of stereotyping Palestinians and Arabs in such a way that we hear comments like that, and some people won't pause, that the burden of advancing peace would be on the parents teaching their kids, rather than looking at the brutality of the occupation or US complicity. And that, yeah, and that language itself is comes from so many decades of stereotyping. So it made me include these images. In these past 2 years, most of my comics have had drawings attached, but some of them are just words. And sometimes it's because I was doing comics so quickly. And in this case, it was just that I was doing comics so quickly that it's just words. But in the documentary and book, Real Bad Arabs, How Hollywood Vilifies the People, Dr. Jack Shaheen argues Arabs are the most maligned group in the history of Hollywood. He looks at more than 1,000 films that make visible a dangerously consistent pattern of anti-Arab stereotypes. Films where Arabs are portrayed as subhuman, dangerous, incompetent, lecherous. And he lists many, and I looked at the ones from 1980, the 1980s when I was growing up, and this was just a short list of the many. And I go on to say Western culture creates stories of an evil outsider, and politicians and corporate media and Hollywood perpetrate those stories. Dr. Shaheen describes how Hollywood and US policy feed and enforced each other. And then he quotes Jack Valenti saying, Washington and Hollywood spring from the same DNA. And then I continue in the comic, let's talk with friends and family about the decades-long vilification of Arabs and how stereotypes feed a colonialist mindset that seeks to rob a people of their humanity, a colonialist mindset that enables land theft, torture, and genocide. So an interpreted world isn't home. Um, which is a topic that I begin Outside the Ark, which was published, self-published in 2005. I just want to share the first 5 pages. Whoops. Are you seeing it very large?
Yeah,
Okay.
it looks a little cropped off, but now it's better.
Okay. I thank you. When I was a little kid, so again, this is just the dangers of living an interpreted story. When I was a little kid, my favorite book was a Hallmark version of the Noah's Ark story. My fantasy was to live in my own ark with my own family and my own personal zoo. I thought of the cold rain outside pounding hard against the ark shutters, while inside the ark, all of us were warm and safe. One day, my Sunday school teacher, Mrs. Graff, read the Noah's Ark story aloud to our class. When she came to the part about the floodwaters drying up, she held the book open to the picture of the sturdy, gleaming ark, surrounded after the flood by the lush green of trees and colorful plants, all under the beautiful rainbow in the sky. The entire class was entranced, except for the boy sitting next to me. Joel stared at the picture our teacher held up and yelled suddenly, "Where are all the bodies?" Oops. Our teacher looked puzzled. She put her book down. What bodies, Joel? Joel twisted in his chair. He squinted at the book in her lap, then looked around at all of us staring at him. The bodies, he said, cried, where are all the bodies of the people and the animals that died in the flood? Our teacher narrowed her eyes. The room was very still. Then she said in a gravelly, disapproving voice, he was a very rude boy. When she continued with her story, holding up for us that glorious rainbow in the book, I saw the bodies, lifeless bodies lying across the weather-beaten landscape. Some bodies lived in the safe and protected ark, while some bodies drowned in the holy flood. It was the first time I was aware that there can be a story behind a story we tried to hide. In April 2003, General Colin Powell addressed the UN delegates to make the case for war just weeks before the United States invaded Iraq. Behind him, the reproduction of Picasso's painting Guernica that hangs in the United Nations building was hidden from public view. The painting shows the story of an aerial bombardment. It shows the story of terrorized civilians. When General Powell stood in front of it to make his speech, the painting, the story, was covered with a blue cloth and a row of flags. So taking back our own listening. Let me. So my grandmother helped me understand the power of telling our own stories. This is a comic I did in a workshop on epistolary comics, letter comics. Dear Grandma, when we sat together on your braided rug, and this was from your father's coat, you showed me life is not a straight line, but a spiral when he was about your age now. Wow. We continuously come back to things of the past, whoops, and see new connections and have new understandings. So it was such a powerful experience then, and it's still powerful just to remember it, to be sitting with her. And these rugs were very large, and so we were surrounded by the rugs, and she would point to the different fabric and be able to tell me stories based on the piece of the cloth, the particular strand. And it could be from clothes or curtains or bedspreads. But it hit me that these stories that were decades, could be decades apart, were woven together. And the older I get, the more I have the feeling that time isn't linear. My sense of time is much more circular. My sense of memory, that each memory brings me back to another memory. This is a a smaller one of her rugs that I have. Um, it's probably 70 or years old or so. So I zoomed in on this because I was thinking how comics are my form of telling stories, and that today I kind of imagine us all on a giant rug and I'm pointing to the different stories. And they can be decades apart, they can be different from different areas, but they all relate in some way. I just wanted to show you a little bit about the rug making process. So traditionally, and the way my grandmother did it was you would take fabric that's worn out, a worn out shirt. You would create strips, sew it together to create a big strip of these balls, strips of fabric balls, and then you braid them together. And of course, at some point, you get to the end of a strip, which in this metaphor, it could be think of as the end of the story, and then you can either continue that strip, say the red strip with a similar color, or if the story changes, perhaps another color, another fabric. So I spend that much time talking about it because um, as I see my life as a braided rug, uh, on October 7th, 2023, when I heard the news that Palestinians had broken through the barrier and had attacked Israelis, I knew I didn't know how bad it was going to be, but I knew the response would be like nothing we had seen. I knew my life had changed, and my work had changed. I knew that my in the foreseeable future I'd be spending my time and and making comics solely on Palestine. Again, I could never have imagined just how bad it would be, but there was definitely like a before October 7th and an after October 7th. In those, it, I I I have to move. Can't read my. There's something. Okay. Uh, so in the different comics, there's different types of comics. There's like explaining, trying to explain current events. There's stories from Palestinians, sometimes Palestinian loved ones, and then there's personal narrative, remembering my own time in Palestine. And so this is just screenshots of my Instagram page. It was just dozens and dozens, and this isn't all of them, but before I get there, before I talk about post October 7th, I want to take us to this period of 2018 to October 2023. 2018 was when I started making comics. So again, going back to this braided metaphor, if I were where I'm going to take you now is into this period of creating comics, and there's going to be three strands. There's starting Autobio Comics via Linda Berry's X page exercise, which I'll explain. There's Saw Friday night workshops, and then the isolation and loneliness of the pandemic bringing me to create comics that I put under the category of look for the lovely thing. So, uh, it was actually Christmas of 2017 that my sister Beth gave me Syllabus by Linda Berry. And she has this one exercise called the X page exercise where you simply write what you saw, did, and I have to move the screen, and heard, and then a drawing from your day. So I did this religiously for months, and then I started taking the drawing and making it a little, spending a little more time on it. So this is June 28th, feeling depressed, angry, resentful, lonely, drawing helps, eases it all. What is it here that softens the heart? In part, it brings me under the pain where it is quiet. Two things that I love about this drawing is my companion Nemo there, and then beside me, Best American Comics, which is a series that I'm sad is no longer exists. Here's another. I'm going to go quickly through a lot of these drawings just because none of them are precious. Just want to give you an idea of different ways I was experimenting, different materials, different styles. This was before the night we were hit by a hurricane in North Carolina in September of 2018. This is after the hurricane when there was uh, aid work. Um, this comic kind of makes me laugh. So Lucy's saying, now what? Drawing yourself as Peanuts characters? You don't have enough going on already? There's a word for people like you. And Snoopy comes to the rescue. So that's November 2018. There's another drawing of that style. Dream drawings. Someday I'll do a workshop on dreams. These are all dream drawings. Um, I was asked by SoulRad, which is an online site which offers comics criticism and um, comics. So anyway, they invited me to do, I think it was a weekly comic. And so this is one that I did for them. Um, a very late. It's late and I have a comic due tomorrow. I worked on one about a dream that Abe Lincoln was my father. It didn't come together, and now I'm worn out and cranky. Deep sigh, snore. But drawing these chicken scratch drawings eases the tension. Drawing without much thinking is good medicine. And here, just more, I just it was just a year. This is one that I found funny, but I'm gonna go. It was just one. Yeah, I'm just gonna go through this. There's so many that I'm sharing. Here's Can you see the whole Bill? Can you give me a thumbs up if you could? Is it cropped?
It's a little cropped. Yeah, if you could sort of pull it over toward the right side. That shows the now I can see both edges.
Okay, thanks. Sorry about that. Um, so this also starts with a dream. I wake up from the dream. My dog, Nemo's whining. I come downstairs, click, and just walk out into this beautiful moonlit night. And you see on the right side a comic by David. Sorry, what is it's David B. Epilepticus. So I just sharing this just to show you how I'm being influenced by people that whose work I'm looking at. So using those dark areas, dark and light areas. Another one where I'm doing that as well. We are so screwed, not you, you're okay. Click, click, click. Hmm, these are going to be janky. Hour or so later, let's go. And then planting the tin foil or the lumen can flowers. So, which brings me to the next strand, which is so SAW stands for Sequential Artist Workshop. And since the beginning of the pandemic, Saul, along with Believer, the Believer magazine's no longer doing it, but had these Friday night comics workshops, which were free and allowed people to come together in community and make comics. And I learned so much that from participating. So this is one by Beth Tremblay. Oops. Um, Comics about masks. And it's just they're an hour and a half long and you get prompts and it just gets you to think, got me to think in ways I hadn't thought before. So in this one, you imagine yourself wearing the costume of what you fear and imagine what power you might get by becoming that thing. And so as a child, I was very scared of people love dying. In the first panel, Mom, when are you going to die? What if wearing I can't see that. Here we go. What if wearing a death costume gave me the power to understand death? I would give talks. I would say inspiring things. Here's Haiku Comics with David Lasky. He does wonderful poetry comics. I love his. I saw someone drive up to the house behind us. I wondered who it was, but I didn't want them to see me watching them, so I made a sandwich. So here is mine. And again, I'm not sure, maybe it was David who I'm copying in terms of the texture, but someone. After a vet visit, a walk along the Nemo's just reward. This is Finn McCabe having fun with lying. So in his panels, he's trying to get his kid to put sunscreen on and the kid's not doing it. So the idea is to exaggerate to show a truth. So here's mine. I've been drawing a lot of comics lately. Come on up, time for Friday Night Comics. And you can see I'm holding these are all done on sticky notes, which he recommended. Because I started late in life, there's a sense of wanting to make up for lost time. And he's saying escalate like crazy by lying. I draw every available moment. Honk, honk. Whoops. I want to give it everything I have. I want to be completely used up when I die. Opposites and Giggles with November Garcia, where you're supposed to draw the opposite of what you're feeling, like a facial expression, the opposite of what you're feeling. Here I'm feeling unsure. I've been drawing panels nonstop for days. I can't see straight. And lastly, and this might be my favorite one, Interspecies Grief Workshop with Nicole Georges. And this we created a booklet from this. When I was a kid, we watched a nature program every Sunday evening. The okay, my favorite involved primates and often featured Jane Goodall or David Attenborough. I loved the interspecies love. 2 years ago, I watched David Attenborough's A Life on Our Planet projected onto the side of a barn. This is a story of how we came to make our greatest mistake, he says. One of the first things he says is how the film is his witness statement. There is beautiful footage from his early years as a naturalist, contrasted with today and how much the Earth's biodiversity has degenerated. I want to see what Earth was like before our arrival. I want to say, I'm so sorry. I want to start again. Okay. And then I started, um, I had confidence to start making comics about Palestine. So this is a comic on night raids. Get all the kids from the house. They're asleep. Get them. Israeli soldiers often enter Palestinian homes at night, but they're little and it's cold. Get all the kids out here. Hamada, wake up. Uday, the military's here. Don't be scared. I'll be with you. They often make arrests or take photos of kids. Gabby, are these the kids that were throwing stones? I think so, but I did not see their faces. It's them. Come on, let's wrap this up. It wasn't them. They were with me, tending sheep. They will be interrogated. If it wasn't them, they will be rescued. They will be released. Their world could turn upside down, and your child would be in my child's place. An Israeli human rights organization gives cameras to families to document the raids. See BeitZalem.org. So that all of those words were documented by the family that was documenting the arrests, the detentions. I'm going to go quickly through this one. I used to live in the Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood of East Jerusalem. Whoops, not that quickly. Where an Israeli court recently ruled to evict Palestinian families to make way for Jewish settlements. You are stealing my house. The settlers that claim the land do not say that they are the owners. If I don't steal it, someone else is going to steal it. But that they once but once the owners were Jewish. No, no one is allowed to steal it. And since the settlers are also Jewish, they have the right to claim it. Yakub, you know it's not your house. Yes, but if you, whoops, sorry. But if I go, you don't go back because another settler will come. It's easy to yell at me, but I didn't do this. The laws and policies that enable him. Whoops. Okay, these are just more. I'll share this one because it's with my dad, who's since passed. So he's saying from the phone that's perched above my station, I read your last comic about not knowing what to make the comic about. I have a suggestion. Want to hear it? Sure. More Nemo. Okay, so I'm gonna take you back on the magic rug, and we're gonna go to the mid 70s when I was a kid. And there's gonna be actually there's just gonna be one strand here. I spent a lot of time alone, sort of in my imagination and the imaginal realm. I love to be solitary. Um, and but before I go into my work, my favorite book at the time was The Phantom Toll Booth, which my eldest brother gave to me for Christmas. And I loved the story, and I also loved the illustrations by Jules Pfeiffer. I still do. I often gravitated toward stories and movies that featured an individual who was often solitary and went on adventures. So this, like Grizzly Adams, this is another example. So Milo finds a phantom toll booth mysteriously in his bedroom, and he goes on a journey. Here's Talk, a watchdog that he meets. Anyway, I partly bring that up because I feel like when I look at his work and then I look at some of the drawings that I did for Magic Nation, there seems to be a little bit of resemblance. So in Magic Nation, I was trying to show, trying to depict experiences I had as as a child in this solitary world in the yard. Um, I don't I don't think I ever really succeeded, but I do like some of these pages. Um, I remember Aunt Friends. Oops. Watching closely, I see not all ants are industrious, as I had been told. Some appear lazy and hiding from ants whose job it is to find them. If I could even get closer, I bet. Oops. Some appear lazy. Okay, if I could get closer, I bet I would see all kinds of ants, comic ants, singing ants, ants that danced. So here are some more pages from that. I was trying to get at the experience of my own boundaries dissolving and the boundaries between those things around me and my own sort of dissolving. There's sort of like not one, not two of us. And as an adult, I tried to describe that in this comic. There's a Celtic proverb that says heaven and earth are only 3 feet apart, but in the thin places, that distance is even shorter. According to the folklore, in thin places, the fabric between the physical world and spiritual world is porous, and the boundaries between you and not you are soft. In thin places, you may feel very small and yet more yourself. You see that everything touches everything else. And there's resonance in this. And I just, oops. Um, every day there is beauty, including moments of care and kindness, the song and flight of birds, the steady rhythm of waves. When the heart is broken, we find healing and beauty. Okay, so now we're coming to the last section of this presentation. And then I look forward to talking with you. So this will be after October 7th. I need to take a. So again, I'm going to be sharing comics that it'll become clear. A family I know in Gaza City runs a bakery. In recent years, some of their neighbors have been bringing over food to cook in their oven. Thank you, it is nothing, because these neighbors haven't been able to afford fuel due to the Israeli blockade on Gaza. Yesterday afternoon, their neighborhood was bombed, apartment buildings with people in them. When those who were out returned, they used their hands to dig for loved ones. There are no machines to help, no airlifts. Their hands are all they have. I keep asking myself, how are we to live in this world? The answers today are keep looking for beauty and connection, fight for those still alive, take whatever fire you have and share it for as long as you have it. So that was October 12th, 2023. This is a poem by uh, Khalid Juma. O rascal children of Gaza. O rascal children of Gaza, you who constantly disturb me with your screams under my window, you who filled every morning with rush and chaos, you who broke my vase and stole the lonely flower on my balcony. Come back and scream as you want and break all the vases, steal all the flowers. Come back, just come back. August 24th, 2014. I reached out to him for permission to put it into images. When Khalid Juma wrote this poem in August 2014, 509 children had just been killed by Israeli forces during 50 days of indiscriminate attacks on Gaza, many thousands more injured and many more traumatized. This was a 4-panel comic about the Flower Massacre. In this first panel, I say more than 70 people, but they hadn't, as the day went on, it went to over 100 people. Today, more than 70 people were killed and 500 wounded while they were getting aid from trucks in Gaza City. Thousands, thousands of starving people were sleeping in the streets, waking when the trucks arrived. When they began getting the flour and other aid, the tanks opened fire. The Israeli army issued a statement calling the Palestinians waiting for food a violent gathering that made soldiers feel unsafe. So in some of these comics, as you've already seen, I'll use an animal like a cat or plants, cacti. And the reason I do that in part is because what I'm sharing is information I've gathered from other people, and I didn't feel like putting my face so I didn't want to be the narrator. In January 2018, at his home in Gaza, journalist, poet, and refugee Ahmed Abu Artema wrote a Facebook post that went viral. What would happen if Palestinians marched nonviolently in large numbers toward the boundary fence with Israel to demand respect for their rights and call attention to the Israeli imposed blockade that has created hardship for millions of people for more than a decade? Tens of thousands gathered week after week near the fence that keeps 2.2 million penned in, demanding the end of the blockade and the right of return. They were met with live ammunition from Israeli soldiers who killed 220 Palestinians, including journalists, paramedics, and children. 12,733 were injured. On October 24th, an Israeli airstrike on his house killed members of Abu Artema's family, including his 12-year-old son. Ahmed Abu Artema was seriously injured. Israel didn't bomb my house, didn't kill my child by mistake. It's the Israeli strategy. Israel's problem is Palestinian existence itself. An audio message sent to Democracy Now!, November 8th, 2023. So that third thread in this section has to do with my own personal narrative. How I got to Palestine and what I did when I was there and what I witnessed. January 1989, I was a religious studies major at Hamilton College. I joined 17 University of Notre Dame students on their Jerusalem Study Abroad program. All other U.S. colleges had canceled their Jerusalem programs because of the Intifada. Initially, I planned to study in Nepal. I was very interested in Eastern thought and religions. However, when a minor travel advisory came out for U.S. citizens traveling to Nepal, my parents seized on it to ask me to consider another, presumably safer area to study. When I suggested Jerusalem, it was in hopes of Jerusalem making Nepal look safe, but they agreed I should study in the Holy Land. We studied at Tantor Ecumenical Institute in East Jerusalem. I soon learned that East Jerusalem, which was held by Jordan after the 1948 war, operates as a separate city from West Jerusalem, which is held by Israel, and that under international law, East Jerusalem is considered part of the West Bank. Many of the staff at Tantor were from Bethlehem and the neighboring villages, including Sammy, who worked at the front desk. You've got mail. Thank you, Sammy. Sammy was the first to explain closures to me. Often Palestinian cities and villages are cut off from one another by Israeli closure orders. When Israel closes Bethlehem, we try to get to Tantor by avoiding the roads and walking over rough terrain. We have to climb over the wall at the back. We risk being shot if soldiers catch us. Sammy, that's so scary to risk getting shot just for going to work. This is our life. 2 weeks into our program, Sammy invited us to join him for lunch at his home in Bethlehem. Welcome. During lunch, curfew was called by soldiers. it's forbidden to be outside. Israeli army patrols the streets, confining residents to their houses. Anyone seen outside can be shot or arrested. We quickly left to make our way back to Tantor. On entering the square, we see a group of kids running out of an alley. They yell and throw rocks towards an Israeli jeep standing in the square. They then ran back into the alley as two soldiers exit the jeep. One kneels on his knee and aims toward the kids. A classmate yells, "Stop." The soldiers turn, seem surprised, tell us we are forbidden to be there. We explain our situation. They return to the jeep and we continue to Tantor. In the following days, I read reports about clashes between Palestinian youth and Israeli soldiers. Sometimes they would provide ages of the Palestinians killed. Never names, never a photo, never any context. Nothing about schools being closed by Israel or any of the other day-to-day realities of occupation, such as the lockdowns and checkpoints, land confiscation and home demolitions, arrests and detentions without charge or trial. It was the start to my understanding that often the most important parts of the stories are hidden, and that terms like self-defense can be infused with bias and used to mislead the receiver of the story. When I returned to the US, many were not interested in stories from Palestine. I began to realize that Palestinian voices had been so effectively silenced in the media and Palestinians and Arabs vilified in popular entertainment that the stories just didn't fit people's worldview. It made them uncomfortable. Too often their discomfort made me silent. It got me thinking about what first interested me in Buddhism, basically that our minds create the world, that we project our thoughts about something onto the world and suppress information that contradicts those thoughts. What we perceive today is deeply rooted in what we experienced yesterday or many yesterdays ago. In order to really know the truth of things, we need to go beyond the comfort of what we know in our minds. Is this true? Am I absolutely sure this is true? How might I investigate this truth? This takes a certain kind of courage. When I studied at Tantor, a group of us students visited a rehabilitation center in Bethlehem. Most of the people there were boys and young men who had been injured in clashes with soldiers. They seemed eager to share their stories and their visions of a Palestine without occupation. However, there was one older man who seemed to have had enough of sharing stories. Your work is not here. It is in the US. Without US military and financial support, the occupation could not continue. If the occupation was a snake, the US is its head. You need to make that clear to people. I will. I'll try. But will you? A voice inside my head asked. You're a lousy public speaker. You freeze in front of an audience. You're not a good writer. Who would you speak to? How? You stink at conflict. You don't know enough. And because I didn't know enough, I after graduating from college, immediately returned. So this is my return. Um, I think how much of this, oops. So in these 2 pages, I describe leading people around Gaza. So part of my job is to lead people around to introduce them to um, leaders of civil society, including organizers of non-violent resistance and defenders of human rights. And I'll read the second page. Those we met with were often subjected to harassment by the Israeli military and government, whoops, sorry, including being imprisoned and or arbitrarily detained for long periods, usually under administrative detention orders. Among those was the human rights lawyer Raji Sourani, who was active in monitoring the conditions of Israeli prisons and defending Palestinians in Israeli courts. I am often not allowed to see my clients until they are brought into court. They enter looking dazed, often with bruised and swollen faces. Sometimes they have a hard time talking. One day I was standing by the gate of the jail waiting to see clients when I was taken in for questioning. I was soon handcuffed, hooded, and surrounded by Shin Bet. At last we have Raji, they said. I was interrogated for 43 days straight, sometimes just one session a day, sometimes five or six. Only a few hours of being hooded, and you'd feel yourself go mad. During the worst part, I heard myself making strange, uncontrollable sounds. It's hard to breathe and smells like sweat and vomit. I did not do anything outside the law, I kept saying. It was true, however, he was a lawyer and highly revered, including by many in the international community, which made him a target of the Israeli authorities. This is one that I did about Hamas. Those who call Hamas a terrorist organization are ignoring that Palestine is occupied. They don't acknowledge that Hamas is engaged in armed resistance against the colonial power that's carrying out an occupation that is illegal under international law. When Western leaders only engage with Hamas as a terrorist organization to be dealt with only with military force, they are turning their backs on their responsibility to deal with the question of Palestine politically. Let's remember the PLO also engaged in armed resistance and was also labeled a terrorist organization by the US and others. The demand on it was to renounce armed resistance and recognize the state of Israel in order to establish the state of Palestine. Yet 3 decades later, and Palestinians still do not have a state. Okay, some of my favorite comics involve my uh, speaking with my mother. So this is about Christian Zionism. I read a Pew Research Center report saying there are twice as many white evangelical Christians than Jews saying Israel was given to Jewish people by God. Oh, I'm thinking this might be a good way to begin a comic about Christian Zionism. Or maybe I begin with the two Christian Zionists I met who flew to Israel for the first Gulf War. Initially, it was surprising that anyone would be flying in when so many Israelis and internationals were flying out. But they believed it was Armageddon. The war was bringing the second coming of Jesus and wanted to be there for it. Christian Zionism predates Jewish Zionism by at least 60 years. They believe Jews need to return to Palestine in order to hasten the day of end times. There's a Christian colonial theology behind Christian Zionism, one that says there are civilized people and there are barbarians. On October 7th, the face of evil was revealed for the world to see. We stand as one with Israel. Generally, they see conflict as God ordained and subsequently feel okay about fueling them. And now we have the Senate holding a nomination for Christian Zionist Mike Huckabee to be ambassador to Israel. He wants to keep arming and fueling the genocide because he believes it will help usher in the end times. There's no such thing as a Palestinian. He believes Israel must take over more land, expel non-Jews, and continue the bloodshed in order to bring about the second coming of Jesus. I should just I need to take a little pause. So this next comic is also about Christian Zionism. And I just did this a couple weeks ago. And I'm riffing off of a poem by William Blake, who was a favorite poet when I was in high school. The vision of Christ that you do see is my vision's deepest enemy. There's really no such thing as Palestinian. Yours speaks of the destruction of Palestine. There's no such thing as an occupation. Mine speaks as a lover to all humankind. Yours loves the same world that mine hates. Your heaven's doors are my hell's gates. You can you can tell by this one that I was started spending a little more time with the comics. I'm not going to read this one, but this was based on a letter I wrote to my parents in 1989 when I had come back from my first trip to Gaza. And I'm going to end with three comics, and these next two are about people that I've gotten to know and love. The Serta sisters. Mandy and Lara Serda are 48-year-old twin sisters who live in Gaza City. Until October 7, 2023, they worked at Atfaluna Society for Deaf Children, where I worked in the 1990s. Since 2005, they have been documenting birds and other wildlife in Gaza despite many obstacles. For example, it was very difficult for them to get binoculars and zoom lenses, as these are not usually allowed into Gaza by the Israeli authorities. It's also difficult because many good birding areas are restricted in Gaza by the Israeli military, such as border areas, where it is especially dangerous for someone carrying binoculars and a camera. Despite the limitations, bird watching is a source of deep joy for them. The birds help us deal with the pressure of our daily lives. They make us forget everything. The word happiness is not enough to describe what we feel, especially when we see a rare bird for the first time. One such example is the time they spotted a European nightjar, a nocturnal species that is hard to spot because they often perch motionless on a branch and their densely patterned gray and brown plumage blends in with the habitat. I saw the bird resting on an olive branch. It was very well hidden, but we managed to photograph it. It was one of the best days we can remember. Their passion for documenting wildlife began when they observed a Spanish sparrow in their backyard and took a photo with an old phone. They have since upgraded to a Nikon camera and have photographed any and every bird and plant they have come across. In 2013, they set up social media accounts on Instagram and Facebook. What we want to do is reflect the beauty in Gaza. We need to tell the world that in Gaza there is stunning wildlife, not just war and rubble. In their documentation, they have recorded a variety of rare bird and plant species, including, I'm not going to pronounce these. Their extensive archive has become a valuable resource for academics, researchers, and archivists. And then this is these are folks I've met or that I've met online virtually. Stephanie is an artist. Stephanie on the right is an artist in Brooklyn, and she's done a lot of amazing fundraising for people in Gaza. And here she is talking to her colleague, Hatem. I read Anne Frank's diary at the beginning of the war. Oh, wow. I was struck by the similarities, like the high prices, the concentration of people in one area, and the details of living with strangers. We lived with other relatives in my grandparents' apartment, the space divided with a big curtain. We couldn't cross it, but we could hear them and they could hear us. Very stressful. Anne Frank also wrote about the scarcity of resources like clean drinking water. Oh, and having to share it? Yes. Everyone will start to notice when others are consuming a lot. She wrote about the boy living with them eating more than his share. What made you want to read it this time rather than previous conflicts? You knew this one would be different? Oh yeah, this one was different from the start, with terms like genocide being used from the beginning. The rhetoric of Israeli politicians post October 8th, 2023. No partial destruction will suffice, complete devastation. This land is the land of the people of Israel, including Gaza and the West Bank. Palestinian people do not exist. When I heard about the North evacuation order, I said, this is nonsense. They won't ask a million people to leave their houses and go where? Then it turned out to be true. Okay, and the final comic, I'm going to go back to uh, December 2023. These months have brought a new kind of horror and grief and a new kind of loneliness. Witnessing bombs dropping on neighborhoods, people calling for their loved ones under rubble, infants dying slow deaths, Palestinians forced to go farther and farther south while people I love are still in Gaza City, including some with multiple disabilities. I don't have words for the heartbreak. And politicians keep repeating it's tragic, but Hamas is to blame. And people keep echoing those politicians. It's horrible, but Hamas must be stopped. I feel despair. I call friends and family. Hello, do you have time to talk? I'm struggling. I read Edward Said, The power to narrate or to block other narratives from reforming and emerging is very important to culture and imperialism and constitutes one of the main connecting connections between them. I go to a conversation between Adrienne Marie Brown and Lama Rod Owens. I give thanks to Palestinian friends and teachers who have taught me so much about persistence, endurance, and generosity. I call on my ancestors. I thank them. Their endurance under colonialism and empire is what enabled me to be here. I give thanks to comics and to the privilege of having the time to make comics. I draw and I draw and I draw. Drawing connects me to others. I feel a new strength and determination. I watch the tall grass outside my window, bowing back and forth in the breeze, playing with the sunlight. I thank the land for supporting me and giving me life. December 7th. I think if Bill, should I just press stop share?
Yes, you can do that if you're done sharing.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. That was so wonderful. I mean, I had I think just the way that you brought all of that stuff together, talking about the kind of non-linearity, and that reminds me of a quote I heard, that thing about thinking of time as a spiral and something reminds me of a quote I heard recently, and I wish I could remember where, but the quote was something like, "You're not just the age you are, you're every age you've ever been," and it kind of reminded me a little of that when you were talking about that experience of non-linear time. Um, well, that was so rich and beautiful, and thank you so much for sharing all that with us. I would like to offer people the opportunity to ask you questions. If people want to ask a question, you can, raise your digital hand. There's a little raise hand thing here in Zoom, or if somebody has a question they want to ask, they could type it into the chat and I could read it out loud. Um, but I guess I mean there's a lot of questions we could ask from there. But I guess one thing that I want to ask is um, you showed us the book that you had made in 2005, and then it seems like in around 2018 is when you really got deeply involved with making comics. Were you doing like before you got, into making the comics more regularly, were you just doing like other kinds of art, like painting or illustration or book arts or something like that?
Yes. And fabric art or fabric crafts. But primarily painting, which I don't feel like I was ever that good at. And it wasn't until I started making comics that I felt like I joked with people that I felt like I got married to comics because it was really clear that this was going to be a commitment I would have to the for the rest of my life. It just and it really took, I mean, I had tried it at other times, but it was really Linda Berry's instructions that help me get in and like break through and understand some the language that I in the way that I needed to use it. And yeah, I'm never going back, but it's I love I and I'm going to be learning about comics and making them until the day I die.
Yeah. Um, let's see. There are a couple of questions here in the chat. Claudia posted a question here. Claudia, do you want to read that out loud, or would you prefer for me to read that?
I can do it. I think I was really struck tonight by the massive change in the visual since October 7th, and I just would love to talk about how that's felt like for you and what you notice in it. Like it was wild to go to see some of your earlier work with so much color and just uh yeah, just really different to me. I don't know if it feels that way to you though.
You mean the work that did more recently is different from what I did in the beginning of the 2 years?
No, the work since October 7th is really different from earlier comics visually, in addition to obviously the content.
Yeah, because I was like drawing them by the seat of my pants, and I was just draw a part of it. I was just drawing so quickly, and I wasn't really thinking that much about composition or spelling mistakes or anything like that. So that was the main thing. Was just and I'm drawing them faster, so it changes the line. But yeah, I didn't have the same thoughts about it looking a certain way. Does that make sense?
Totally. Do you feel like you purposefully have been using less color along with that? Like, or no?
Um, well, I wasn't using color at the beginning because it just would take more time. So I was just using, first I was working on paper, and then I started using uh, iPad. So I was a stylus. But yeah, I was just also because the subject it was so serious. I think just using black and white seemed to make sense. And
Yeah.
now,
Yeah.
now I'm bringing in color partly because it brings me joy. I enjoy color and but sometimes I add color and I feel like, oh, I prefer it in black and white because
Yeah.
of the subject.
Mm.
Yeah, and I think one thing that I think could like I think sort of contextualizes that too is just the kind of like those images where you were just showing your Instagram feed is just the outpouring. I mean, my understanding is that for certain periods of time, at least over the last couple of years, this has been an almost daily drawing practice for you. Is that correct?
In the beginning, yeah, in the first year, it wasn't every day. I was drawing every day. I wasn't posting every day, but yes,
Mhm,
it's slowed down recently.
mhm, mhm. Um, let's see. Someone posted a question. They said that I can read this one. Can you talk about any pushback you've experienced? Did you get shadow banned for a while or anything like that? Um, yeah, and I've noticed, that like, people use like this, like they won't spell out the full word Palestine or Gaza or something like that. Have you had any experiences along those lines? Because, again, that goes back to that issue of like we're so dependent on these like awful platforms to connect and communicate with each other.
Uh, I don't know how much I've been shadow banned. More, I received a lot of hateful comments, more so in the beginning. Um, I wasn't invited back to certain places where I had previously been invited to give workshops, but those are probably the two things: is just receiving some unpleasant messages and then not being invited back to certain venues.
Let's see. And I apologize if I'm mispronouncing the name. Tema asked if you could share a little bit about your process when you're making a comic. I think, and kind of related, and you had sort of alluded to this before. Katya asked if you draw on paper or computer, and it sounds like you do both.
Yeah, often I start on paper, and a lot of these I start on paper and then I bring it in and make changes on the computer on my iPad through Procreate, the program Procreate. Um, but aside from that, I usually start with words and you know, divide them. I figure out how many panels I want to it requires, whether it's a page or 2 pages. So I divide the words first, and then I come up with images. Um,
Yeah, and that's kind of related too to a question Bob Sikoriak also posted about process, asking if you can talk about how you develop your comics. Do you do like interviews in advance or do you respond day to day to events?
Both. So like the second to last one was an exchange I had, you know, with those two people. Um, but most of the comics, I'm just it's just what comes to my mind about what I need to talk about today, and it may be um, a particular report, a particular story, but it was just very quick and just seeing what would rise up. I'm not sure if I answered that.
No, I think so. Um, one thing I'm wondering too, I mean, you had mentioned you got some um like negative messages from people, which like on social media when you're doing work that visible and you're kind of putting your neck out there and making statements, that's bound to happen. What are some of the more, I don't know, like positive connections that came out of doing this work?
I've met remarkable people both in Gaza and in the US through this work, including the Serta sisters who worked at the school that I worked at, but I didn't know them when I was there. We know people, we have mutual friends, but uh, and they're remarkable, and we are in communication regularly. So that's definitely the the best thing. And also meeting other comic artists, and I've learned a lot that like Spain has a really cool art scene, comic scene, and um, have shared some of my work. There's a group there that shared some of my work. Um, so definitely the people, and also the clarity. I mean, I think this is true for a lot of people that these years are just offering us a lot of clarity, and we see things that may have been harder to see, or we see things more deeply. And although the reality can be really hard, I'm grateful for that understanding and that clarity.
Mm. No, that's a great point. I think that's absolutely true. I mean, I don't think, I mean, and it's again, I mean, and I think potent to hear you say that, especially because you've been engaged with Palestine for a long time, so even with that, it's still like stark, the difference. And yeah, it does kind of feel like the world before October 7th is just not the same world afterwards for many reasons. But I think certainly from the perspective of an American, I think you really, when you see how the political system supports this and the media supports this and everything. I mean, it's very stark. And I guess that may be an interesting question too, is like in a way, like whether you sort of want to or be or not, you kind of become um like a voice of experience, as I was saying, to maybe people who haven't been so engaged with these issues for as long as you have been. um what is like, and it's really hard to separate this from just like the horror that of everything that's happening. But I guess for you, what has it been like to see other people speaking up or making art about this, or trying to figure out how to process this and be useful and so on? I mean, I don't know. I mean, that might be too broad or open a question, but I'm just kind of curious what some of the things are that you see from your perspective as someone who's been to Gaza, who lived there for years, who maintains relationships there. Like, what do you see? I mean, seeing, yeah, cartoonists, making comics about it, or people just trying to speak up about it in their different ways. I don't know, like what has that been like to observe?
I want to pause because I don't want to just give a quick answer.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, uh, there's so much there's so much beauty being created, or people who are trying to who are fighting for liberation of Palestine, liberation for us all, and there's so so much, or the poems that are coming out both out of from Gaza and elsewhere, and the comics and comics from around the world. Yeah, that's incredible. And all these things, the flotillas, comedians that have come on board, people who are just bringing their gifts, their particular gifts. That's all keeps you going. Yeah.
Hmm, hmm. Yeah. Um, Deborah, do you want to ask your question, or should I read what you've posted here in the chat?
I'm good either way.
Oh, why don't you go ahead then?
Okay, I'm worried there's loud background noise here, but I said it's interesting because I'm hearing Bill interpret your mentioning of clarity is that even you with so much experience that you're seeing, quote, the difference. But part of what I take from your work is the continuity. That's what I see in you using poems from 2014 that still apply and further back. Can you speak to how you grapple with and represent continuity of horror and resilience over so many decades in your work?
Well, that's certainly, I mean, I think you're part of what I feel my role has been in these past few years, because I was there during the first and the second Intifada, and maybe you've already said this, is to that feels very important, to say this didn't start October 7th. And a lot of people are saying that, but to offer a story um, feels important. And there's two things I think that I wanted to say. And that's what I was getting at also. And Bill, you alluded to this, the spiral thing that, you know, in these past 2 years, I've been thinking back on when I was 20 and first in Palestine, and it feels like yesterday, or it feels like time has collapsed. And I have a better understanding of that time now, and that time is informing this time. But one of the things I guess about clarity is, I hope I say this in the right way, but that like my own boundaries are a lot more clear than they had been, in terms of like, if you don't see this as a genocide, or if you're still like on the fence about something, like I'll talk to you about it if I feel like there's an opening. But if there's not an opening, like part of the clarity is like, I don't know, I don't, then I can't be in conversation with you, because this this is like everything right now. And so that's part of the clarity too, is helping me set boundaries sometimes. I hope that makes sense.
This isn't really an art question, but I guess, that question of boundaries too. I mean, it's not exactly boundaries, but, I mean, one of the things that, like, I mean, kind of like I was saying before, we have this like constant feed on our phones, and it goes to that issue of witnessing, and one of the things, I would find myself periodically saying to, different people is like, it's like it feels bad to look and it feels bad to look away, and there, that like just because on a very basic level, it's like nobody's nervous system is intended to see, just like a steady stream of images of people being harmed, and and that's just one way of experiencing it, and you're in touch with people and so on. Like like how do you I guess like how do you find a kind of balance where, and then I think one of the answers in your comic is that it's something that you're always trying to achieve, but I guess just like that balance between like being able to attend to the thing and attending to your self so that you have the ability to continue to be present, like I don't know, I mean, especially with the kind of daily practice you've been keeping too, I'm kind of wondering about that, I guess, if that makes
Not sure.
sense.
I'm not sure. I think this might partly answer it. Partly answer your question. I more recently I've been inviting, like I made a song about it. I've been inviting joy to be a teacher because I feel like in the past 2 years it's been very hard to access joy and even access beauty. Like my favorite season is fall, and I think 2023 I felt like it didn't touch me, and I'm not. That's not a. I'm not blaming myself, and it's just the truth of it. And so one thing, there's a quote by Robin Wall Kimmerer, who wrote Breeding Sweetgrass about. I'm not going to remember the quote, but it's about like sort of our the need for joy and the sort of our responsibility for feeling joy. And so, um, when I totally feel the same thing about like it feels bad to be looking all the time. It feels bad to not look. And I have definitely, I am not looking as much anymore. And that sometimes feels bad, but I've put more boundaries on like what time of day, how much, how I'm doing that. I'm still in touch with all my loved ones there. There's certain things that are non-negotiable, but I have developed different yeah, different boundaries, and just like trying to, and I think part of my desire tonight to bring in some of those earlier comics like during the pandemic of looking for the subtle joys, looking for the simple beauty of the day is because it's so important to me and my well-being. Yeah.
Well,
And
it's
but it's a real practice. Like I have to, it is a practice. And like that comics practice with the pandemic, like I became a happier person from that practice. It was, but I did it daily.
I mean, that's a nice thing to hear about becoming a happier person by drawing and noticing things. Yeah, yeah, and I mean also like uh, I mean some of it is too like remembering what we're living and fighting for, also, like so that everybody can actually access like the beauty and joy in life. That's every person's birthright. Any other questions?
Oh, if I can just say to add, because it feels important, like one of my reasons for focusing on like the Serta sisters, and sometimes in my stories on Instagram, like I try to look for the beauty and the joy that's coming out of Gaza, because it's there every day, along with the horror. So that feels really important to share that and to be with it.
Um, are there any other, did anybody else have a question or even just a comment? More of a comment than a question, less of a question than a comment. 50% question, 50% comment.
This is Tema, and yeah, I just want to. My comment is that there's just so much power in in the way that you tell the story, like of the Serta sisters, or you tell a snippet of your comic tells a snippet of a story and gives me a glimpse into um, the experience of people in Gaza that is uh, never shown it in any other forum. And most of the diet that we're fed, most of what we're fed, or most of what we're shown, is the horror. And so I'm just reinforcing what you said and the importance of reminding us and showing us the I don't know. These are all cliches, but the deeper humanity, but just showing us the simple. I don't, you know what I'm saying. I don't really have the words, but giving us a way of seeing people that we don't have in any other venue that I know of. So I'm very, very grateful.
Thank you, Dema.
Yeah, it's and those stories are like an antidote to the dehumanization, that um kind of is obviously, the policy, but also bleeds through into the coverage of the way these things are talked about and so on. Sasha, do you have another question?
Hi, Alan, and hi, Bill. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for this. It's been really wonderful. My question was, is there a book or a film or any piece of art that connects to your work that you wish we'd all go seek out?
That connects to my work.
Yeah, or just that connects to you and where you're coming from.
That's a great question. I'm a little fatigued, so nothing's. I did, I did create a 40-page. The cover is on the promo for this. How are we to live, which is now back in print, and that can be gotten. And details are on my Instagram page. So, um, otherwise, I don't have a. I hope to be um, publishing soon or soonish. So there'll be something else.
Um, oh right. Yeah, so that let me just hold that up again. This is How Are We to Live from, I want to make sure I get the name of the publisher right. Paper City Publishing. This is really a beaut. I'm not sure if they still have copies of it or not. Do they still have it?
I think so. Last I asked, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I checked right before we got online, and it looked like it was still on their website. This is a really beautiful collection of Ellen's comics. I reread it today. Several of the pieces that Ellen read are in this, and it's really beautifully printed. Um, uh, and I mean, it's just kind of it was kind of interesting earlier when someone asked if you worked at, analog or digital, because when even it's so like hard to tell, because once you put everything through the Riso printer, it all has that like nice kind of graphite charcoal sort of look to the line anyway. But yeah, no, this is a really beautiful book, and I highly recommend it. And another beautiful aspect of this book, of course, is that the way that you can get it is by making a donation to any kind of Palestine, Gaza related charity or fundraiser or whatever. Um, and Deborah has just posted also a link to the chat, an interview with Ellen from Indie Week publication. Thank you for posting that, Deborah. Is any other questions while we have Ellen here with us? Okay. Well, thank you so much, Ellen. I mean, it's like I'm grateful for your work, and I also wish you didn't have to make it, it's I don't know how and I think I don't think you can resolve those things. It's just we're just in one of these you just kind of have to hold those two thoughts in your head and just like live there, because that's what the world kind of calls on us to do right now. But I personally am very grateful for your work. So thank you very much for making the work, and thanks for talking to us about it tonight. I really appreciate that.
Thank you, Bill. Thanks to everyone for being here.
And this talk will be posted to our YouTube channel shortly, so you can subscribe to that. And before I let you all go, I'll just let you know that the symposium continues to meet every week on a wide range of varied topics. And next week we'll be hearing from John A. Crespi, who's going to talk to us about historical Chinese comics. So every week it's something different. But this week I'm glad that we had a chance to hear from Ellen. Okay, well, thank you so much, everyone. I'll let you all go. Thanks again, Ellen. Please join me in giving Ellen a great big round of applause, and I wish you all a good night. Thank you very much.